Hegel's Philosophy of Nature, paragraph 249. Nature is to be regarded as a system of stages, the one proceeding of necessity out of the other, and being the proximate truth of that from which it results. This is not to be thought of as a natural engendering out of the other, however, but as engendering within the inner idea which constitutes the ground of nature. Metamorphosis accrues only to the notion as such, for development is nothing but the alteration of the same. In nature, the notion is, however, partly a mere inner principle and partly an existence, which is simply a living individuality. Existent metamorphosis is therefore limited solely to this individuality. Remark. The inept conception in which the progression and transition of one natural form and sphere into a higher is regarded as an outwardly actual production, somewhat clarified by being relegated into the murkiness of the past, may be found in both ancient and modern philosophies of nature. It is precisely the externality which allows differences to fall apart and appear as indifferent existence, which is characteristic of nature. It is the dialectical notion which is the inner principle of the same and guides its stages forward. Thinking consideration must reject such nebulous and basically sensuous conceptions as, for example, the so-called emergence of plants and animals out of water and of the more highly developed animal organizations out of the lower, etc. Addition. The view that natural things are useful is true in that it denies that they are absolute purpose in them and for themselves. This negativity is not, however, external to them, but is the immanent moment of their idea, which brings about their mutability and transition into another existence, but at the same time their transition into a higher notion. As the notion posits all particularity within existence at once, it does so in a universal manner. To think of the genera as gradually evolving themselves out of one another in time is to make use of a completely empty concept. The time difference is quite devoid of interest for thought. If it is merely a matter of enumerating the genera in order to show, in a convenient way, how the series of living beings divides itself into general classes, from the simplest to those richer in determinations and content, or the other way about, this will always be of general interest. It is a way of ordering things, as is the division of nature into the three kingdoms, and is better than mixing everything up, which tends to repel the intuitive notion in general intelligence. But one must not think one makes such a dry series dynamic, philosophical, more comprehensible, or what you will, merely by using the concept of emergence. The animal world is the truth of the vegetable world, which in its turn is the truth of the mineralogical world. The earth is the truth of the solar system. In a system, the most abstract term is the first, and the truth of each sphere is the last. It is at the same time only the first term of a higher stage, however, The completion of one stage out of the other constitutes the necessity of the idea, and the variety of forms has to be grasped as necessary and determinate. A land animal has not proceeded by a natural process out of an aquatic animal and then flown into the air. Neither has the bird returned to the earth again. If we want to compare the stages of nature with one another, we are perfectly justified in observing that this animal has one ventricle, while that has two, but we cannot go on to say that parts have been added as if this had actually taken place. Nor should we use the category of an earlier stage in order to explain a later one. It would be a formal howler to say that the plant constituted the carbon and the animal the nitrogen pole. Evolution and emanation are the two forms in which the progressive stages of nature have been grasped. The course of evolution begins with what is imperfect and formless, such as humidity and aquatic formations, leads on to what emerged from water, such as plants, polyps, mollusca, and fishes, progresses to land animals, and arrives finally at man as he emerges out of animals. This gradual alteration is said to be an explanation and comprehension of nature. The doctrine is derived from the philosophy of nature and is still widely prevalent. Although quantitative difference is easy enough to understand, however, it explains nothing. The course of emanation is peculiar to the Oriental world, where it is regarded as a series of degradations, beginning with the perfection and absolute totality of God. God has created, and fulgurations, flashes, and likenesses have proceeded from him, so that the first likeness most resembles him. The first production is supposed in its turn to have given birth to something less perfect than itself, and so on down the scale, so that each thing begotten is in its turn procreative, down as far as the negative, which is matter, or the acme of evil. In this way, emanation ends in the complete absence of form. Both these progressions are one-sided and superficial, and postulate an indeterminate goal. But the progress from the more to the less perfect has the advantage of holding up the prototype of a perfect organism, which is the picture that must be in our mind's eye if we are to understand stunted organizations. That which appears to be subordinate within them, such as organs with no functions, may only be clearly understood by means of the higher organizations in which one recognizes the functions they perform. If that which is perfect is to have the advantage over that which is imperfect, it must exist in reality, and not only in the imagination. In the concept of metamorphosis, there was also a fundamental idea which persists throughout all the various genera, as well as the individual organs, so that they are merely transfigurations of the form of one and the same prototype. One speaks, for example, of the metamorphosis of an insect, in which the caterpillar, the chrysalis, and the butterfly are one and the same individual. In individuals, it is certainly true that the development takes place in time, but this is not so in the genus. If the genus exists in a particular way, the other modes of its existence are also posited. If water is posited, air and fire are also, etc. It is important to maintain identity, but not less important to maintain difference, which is pushed into the background if only quantitative change is considered. It is here that the simple concept of metamorphosis shows itself to be insufficient. This leads on to the concept of a series of natural things, and in particular of living things. The desire to understand the necessity of such a development makes us look for a law governing the series, or a basic determination which, while positing variety, recapitulates itself within it, and so simultaneously engenders a new variety. But to augment a term by the successive addition of uniformly determined elements, and only to see the same relationship between all the members of the series, is not the way in which the notion determines. It is in fact precisely this conception of a series of stages and so on, which has hindered advances in the recognition of the necessity of formations. It turns out to be a hopeless task to attempt to arrange the planets, metals, or chemical bodies in general, plants and animals into a series, and to look for law governing such a series, because nature does not distribute its formations into series and member, and the notion distinguishes according to qualitative determinateness, making leaps in the process. The old saying, or law as it is called, non datura saltus in natura, is by no means adequate to the diremption of the notion. The continuity of the notion within itself is of an entirely different nature.